The Coffin of Andy and Leyley packs into an hour what most games need sequels to accomplish, and by the end the complexity makes it feel like not an hour has passed, but days. This ain't your Resident Evil sort of horror though. It's not about the jump scares and gore. In fact, the macabre imagery and happenings are mostly made fun of or presented in a pleasing art style. The horror certainly doesn't come from the gameplay either, which is more like a webcomic with the addition of some light puzzles. No, what makes Coffin fascinating in that twisted way is how messed up the two protagonists are. Two crazy people feeding off each other in a horrendous codependency. A doormat who's just barely clinging on, and an elaborate manipulator focused on extracting one thing. This dynamic serves as the narrative backbone, with almost every other element of the story playing into it in some way. It is through their relationship that Coffin explores a variety of themes like loneliness, guilt, envy, control, identity, and so much more. The story is about the Graves siblings, Andrew and Ashley, also known as Andy and Leyley. On the surface, they appear to be lively, banterous siblings, and they play off each other really well, with Andrew being the broody, level-headed guy and Ashley being the bubbly rascal. Their contrasting personalities set the stage for a lot of wisecracking, and it's all very fun. It's clear they truly love each other. But this stability rests on a delicate balance Ashley has engineered. You see, our bubbly rascal becomes volatile, hysterical, even sinister when this balance breaks. Ashley's entire sense of self hinges on Andrew's love, and any threat to her exclusive jurisdiction over him must be eliminated. So, Ashley has learnt to be quite the puppet master. She's always on top of the situation to ensure Andrew isn't out there chasing hussies, because for her, Andrew is a precious commodity. No, he is her birthright, and she'll pull every string to keep him tied to her. To this end, her mischievous personality perfectly equips her to push the buttons, as she always knows how to get under his skin to make him feel guilty, weak, and dependent on her. This adds an interesting twist to the yandere trope. Rather than being a psycho mass murderer, Ashley instead manipulates Andrew into securing her interests for her, strengthening his emotional dependence in the process. She's very careful to avoid crossing the line herself, as she wants it all on Andrew's conscience, but she does take some direct action, like stalking and harassing his girlfriends until they break up with him, which she explains as doing a favor for him anyway. Ultimately, she absolutely cannot allow Andrew to have any female company, lest her importance as his sister be diminished. Now shake up their lives with a supposed parasitic outbreak, and the siblings find themselves quarantined in their apartment with no access to food. Nothing gets in or out of these locked doors. Anyone caught approaching or escaping the building is killed on sight. The news reports on TV lie about how excellent the quarantine conditions are, and all the while Andrew and Ashley's parents are suspiciously out of town. Nothing's right here. After being cooped up for 3 months, the siblings have well and truly run out of food. This is all grim, but despite being tired and frail, Ashley is actually enjoying this. Even as they face starvation and death, being trapped with Andrew gives her an exhilarating sense of security because Andy physically can't escape from her. So the story begins in ideal conditions as far as Ashley's concerned, so she's actually pretty calm at this point, and you don't quite know how twisted she is yet. Andrew himself isn't coping. He wasn't even coping prior to the lockdown because this apartment is merely another coffin in the pile. Andrew's got the typical depressive tendencies, wearing black, smoking, disheveled hair, and daydreaming about how romantic it would be to jointly commit suicide with Ashley. Obviously, Andrew's troubled because despite a stoic demeanor, his supposed level-headedness is put to the test by his weakness to Ashley's schemes. He really wants to be a good older brother, and due to their neglectful parents, he's been the only light in Ashley's life all throughout. She's a porcelain doll that Andrew has the duty to take good care of, no matter how much it exhausts him. Ironically, little porcelain Leyley described Andrew as a toy that simply goes back into a toy box when she's done playing with him. But at some point she stops seeing Andrew as a plaything, but a core part of her identity, perhaps even her better half. And I think it started around the time she had him kill one of her friends. Their innocent childhood days came to a crashing end when one of Leyley's friends confided in her that she had a crush on Andy. This was a betrayal to her. She described it as stealing from another woman, and she wouldn't stand for this transgression. So she devised a plan to teach this hussy a lesson, or rather, have Andy teach her a lesson. Despite hearing the girl asthmatically wheezing for breath, Andy is goaded into being a good older brother and locking her in a dusty container for Leyley's sake, though he promises to return shortly thereafter. But when Andy returned, he found that she choked to death inside there. What started out as noble intentions on Andrew's part as a loyal older sibling ended up shattering his sense of self and reducing him to a servile husk. Overnight, he went from a pretty mature young lad to a pathetic footstool racked with guilt, and Ashley couldn't have gotten a better deal than this. She got her perfect revenge and welded Andrew to her permanently. The intensity of Ashley's disgust at this hussy is such that her name is entirely censored to the audience. In the original release of the game, even Ashley calling her a cunt was too humanizing and got censored as well. Ashley has erased her from existence in every conceivable way. She won. She shows no remorse for her passing and in fact tells Andrew she's glad she choked to death. The only respite Andrew finds is in his new victim complex, where he can avoid accountability for all his wrongdoings by convincing himself it's entirely Leyley's fault. The worst part of Andrew's coping mechanism is that Ashley is keenly aware of it, so she can put him on the spot and have him make a choice, and he'll do it, and he'll blame Ashley for his own involvement. It's not his fault the girl died. It's not his fault he stands up his dates. It's not his fault he cannibalized the neighbor. It's not his fault he hacked up the security guard. It's not his fault he slit the 302 girl's throat. She made him do all this. The effects of the incident on Andrew go beyond his submissiveness. His fantasies of jumping off the balcony with Ashley, and the fact they specifically include Ashley, sound like a poetic gesture, an apology to Ashley's deceased friend. His guilt also manifests in his black attire, akin to funeral dress. It's like he is mourning the girl. How cruel and ironic then that the orchestrator of her death, who has always worn matching clothes with Andrew, has now mimicked his macabre appearance. It's clear that Andrew's psyche is hanging on a thread, but what if I told you the siblings have split personalities too? It is, after all, the coffin of Andy and Leyley. Andy, as Andrew puts it, is spineless, or as Leyley puts it, a toy to be put in her toy box. He's the idyllic older brother who's put on this earth to spoil Leyley. Leyley, accordingly, is a brat with a penchant for chaos and is Ashley's unrestrained id. Leyley arises when Ashley needs to regain control over the situation, and Andy arises when Andrew needs to shirk his agency to avoid accountability. They're perfectly set up for a symbiotic relationship, as Andy depends on Leyley being an evil, psychotic bitch, and Leyley depends on Andy being a loyal brother who can be cracked open. It's a cycle of mutually beneficial blame that is very difficult to break, especially since Andrew might have blown his brains out by now if not for it. The excellent art direction subtly tells what's going on in their minds too. The illustrations start off round and cutesy, then become more and more angular to reflect the ever-permeating gravity of the darkening story. Brilliantly, this visual device disproportionately affects Andrew. He begins taking things seriously a lot sooner, whereas Ashley keeps her flippant demeanor up as much as possible, sometimes going back and forth as her composure teeters. She's staying bubbly and teasy to maintain control, or the appearance of control, over a worsening situation, whereas Andrew's conscience and brooding outlook naturally makes him susceptible to the severity of the circumstances. I think it's genius how details like this can convey the power dynamics and attitudes of the characters in each scene, and my favorite showcase for the technique is when Andrew cracks. When Andrew kills a security guard to save Ashley, he's very, very disappointed in her for putting herself in danger and necessitating this kill. Andrew's sanity is lapsing to the point of embracing the Andy and Leyley nicknames he otherwise despises. Red flag. Taking the existing interplay between innocent Andy and evil Leyley and flipping it on its head, Andy is now trying to be the dominant party. She visibly tries her best to maintain her bubbliness, but Andy's decided that things are going to be different now. He's not above threatening her, and issues a clear warning as she continues her impudence and nonchalance. Ultimately, Ashley talks her way out of this like always, which includes guilt-tripping him, But she learns the wrong lesson from this. Instead of learning to be more careful with Andrew, she learns that he will always back down. This miscalculation comes back to bite her when she eventually pushes Andrew too far in what I think is the best scene of the game and the part that makes it the horror masterpiece of 2023. There's many coffins in the coffin of Andy and Leyley. There's the apartment they're trapped in. There's the dusty box Leyley's friend was locked inside of. There's the freezer the neighbors' hacked up corpses stored in. But the true coffin, which has long suffocated the siblings and closed the walls in on them, is each other, their codependency. Fittingly, the climax of this coffin is when they have an argument over Andrew's love life and who is responsible for their homicides and cannibalism. Despite not having a strong conscience, Ashley is still defensive about her innocence because A. Andrew's easier to control when he's guilty, and B. riling him up to hurt him and make him hurt her keeps her on his mind. So naturally, she goes manic as she offers to kill herself for his joy. Wow. And deconstructs him as a hypocrite who has chosen her every step of the way. And by deconstruct, I mean screaming, pulling his bloody hair and laughing hysterically as she reminds him that he chose to lock that girl in the box where she choked to death. It's the great taboo topic that they'd never addressed till now, and the explosive way Ashley mocks him for it prompts a cathartic response as he begins strangling her. As Andrew grips his hands on her neck, Ashley is at first smugly smiling, blushing even. She sees this as nothing more than a pathetic little rebellion from Andrew. She confidently believes she's still in control and that Andrew will quickly drop this temper tantrum. But then, she realizes Andrew actually intends to kill her. She realizes he is amputating the source of his frustrations and torment. So, she drops the attitude immediately. She becomes mellow, she can't summon any argument to defend herself and stops resisting, then suggests that Andrew simply kill her if he intends to run away from her. This is not reverse psychology. This is not a last-ditch effort to wheedle her way out. Without Andrew's unconditional love, Ashley is useless and purposeless. Andrew is the concept of love in her mind. There is no difference. She has a gun on her right now, but has no intention to wave it, not even shoot herself with it, because her love for Andrew is so twisted that here and now, her last dying wish, should she die, is to maximize Andrew's happiness by letting him enjoy the sadistic pleasure of choking her lights out. To allow him to relish in the relieving ecstasy of feeling her gnarly soul slip away as he tightens his grip around her neck. That is fucking scary. That should feel happy dying by his hands. That should fulfill her purpose this way. That should deliver a brimming gift of love to Andrew this way. If there's one moment in her life where she ever felt guilt, it's realizing her beloved Andrew could kill her, and she wanted to make it up to him in the most extreme and intense manner imaginable. And then he just lets go. And I don't rightly know why. I think I know, but I don't know whether I know. And that's amazing. I love how up to interpretation everything in this game is. Hey, so far this video has been full of my interpretations, but this scene is the culmination of the overarching themes of control and distorted love that Coffin navigates, and is full of so much meat that it could very well be beyond me. For me, Ashley's terrifying desires here, more than the starvation, more than the cannibalism, more than the violence itself, is what makes this a horror game. In this one scene alone, the game's genre is categorized. Anyway, I think the reason Andrew let go was, after seeing her in such a state, he felt powerless and gave up because he realized that killing her would just be doing her bidding as always. It would immortalize Ashley as his master. So by releasing her, it comes full circle with both of them fully surrendering, which really fits how intertwined they are, and allows them to make amends afterwards. Or maybe he simply felt bad for her. I don't know. I like my theory better, but you tell me what you think. But Ashley was right, in a way. Andrew did choose to go through with it all. Most people would be a lot more hesitant than Andrew to do the things he did. With this upheaval, the siblings got to have a real talk about their dysfunctional dynamic and gave us one last coffin, the coffin where Andy and Leyley die, so that Andrew and Ashley have the chance to reconcile and explore their own identities. Of course, there is an elephant in the room that I've been avoiding, and it is by far the most controversial part of the entire game. Take a shot whenever the siblings have sexual tension and you'll wake up in a hospital. Look, Coffin isn't a game about incest. But Star Wars isn't about lasers. I agree that Ashley's behaviours are more motivated by her obsessive control over Andrew, but there's obviously some incidental romantic feelings on her part. The way she runs her fingertip down Andrew's face is very suspect. The way she's concerned with whether Andrew in particular considers her pretty is very suspect. The fact her own sex is at all relevant to why she doesn't want Andrew to have female company is, again, very suspect. Anyone who says this is platonic must be trying to ease their discomfort at the narrative. But it's there, and it ties into the themes of the game. And of course it does. Ashley having an all-encompassing love for Andrew turns her insane obsession into an unstoppable force. It makes her scarier. So I would say that the incestuous themes complement the game, plus the fact there's so much uproar about it on Reddit proves it's an effective plot device. But again, her feelings are incidental because the primary driver for her neurotic behaviors is insecurity over abandonment. Boundaries represent betrayal to Ashley, and Andrew seems to be the only person who doesn't crack the shits at her 24/7. From Ashley's perspective, her friends and parents leaving her for dead in lockdown only confirms to her how disgusting independence is and affirms that Andrew is all she needs. That said, Andrew doesn't return her feelings, despite occasional cabedons. Sorry, Ashley. He is still possessive of her though, and it goes beyond needing a scapegoat for his sins. She really is the only one he can confide in, and she's the only one who can understand his pain because he's sure as hell not going to tell anybody the things he's done with her. Furthermore, if we go back to the porcelain doll metaphor, he panics and clamours for her safety in mundane incidents like when she tips a few books, and she intentionally stokes his jealousness by proposing to bang various people for food, which predictably pisses him off. Interestingly, Ashley's sole devotion to Andrew means his possessiveness doesn't actually inconvenience her. Ashley always wins, huh? Coffin has become important to me for many reasons. It's almost an obsession, ironically. There's so much the game says that I still haven't done it justice, but for me, Andrew and Ashley's relationship was profound enough to deserve its own video, and that's partly because I can relate, and I believe some of you can as well. Whether it's a crazy ex, someone who saw something that wasn't there, a drifting friendship, or an arrogant family member, many of us have dealt with Leyleys before. I love Andrew and Ashley, and I'm glad they were able to find peace in the end, but that hasn't been the experience with my Leyleys. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play. I used to wrestle with the idea of whether there was some pride I needed to swallow and just humour these people, whether I was being cruel to someone in need by not entertaining their limerence. But that's bullshit. Worrying about that is how they rope you in and vampirize you. I decided a long time ago that the only thing you can do in life is be brutally honest, because if something's bullshit, then it can go to hell. Yes, there's people I would still be friends with today if I made different decisions, but I don't regret having hair on my head. Andrew and Ashley found their resolution through brutal honesty, and this outcome is precisely what needed to happen for them. Through the siblings, the Coffin of Andy and Leyley delivers a charming, funny, and harrowing look into the line between love and obsession, how coping mechanisms can perpetuate the very thing you're coping with, and how individuality can come under attack by these. Coffin is so sincere and penetrating that it'll stick with you for years to come. It is an instant classic, the likes of which we rarely see these days. And the best part? It's not over. Not even close. Episode 2 is launching on Steam on Friday the 13th, and I hope you will be there to play it. This is Dandy, telling you why the Coffin of Andy and Leyley is dandy. Peace.